little spark in Seoul. I never thought a simple business trip could change the entire trajectory of my life, but that was exactly what happened when I travelled to Seoul, South Korea, for a skincare convention that promised the newest advancements in beauty science. Maybe it was the city's vibrant energy, or the novelty of immersing myself in a culture so different from my own. Or maybe it was him, the mysterious, unassuming young man who, unbeknownst to me, lived a hidden life as part of a rising K-pop group. Even now, I can still feel the hum of neon lights, the taste of sweet rice cakes on my tongue, and the warmth of his hand as it wrapped around mine on one cool Seoul night. Chapter 1. Touchdown in a dazzling world. I arrived in Seoul just as dusk settled over the city, painting the skyscrapers in shimmering reds and golds. From the airplane window, I saw Han River winding its way through a metropolis that pulsed with life. A part of me felt excitement thrumming beneath my skin, but another part felt a stirring of nerves. I was alone in a city half a world away from my Chicago home, with only a couple of colleagues who were flying in later. The skincare convention was a big deal for our cosmetics company. I was an account executive, a career that had me analysing brand partnerships and forging deals. When I stepped out of Incheon International Airport, the mild air of early spring greeted me. It was crisp but gentle, as if nature was whispering, "Welcome to a new beginning." I loaded my suitcases into a taxi. The driver greeted me politely in Korean, and I did my best to respond with the few phrases I'd learned from a language app. The hour-long drive into downtown Seoul felt like I was entering another realm. The cityscape dazzled me. Bright billboards featuring smiling idols, glowing Hangul signboards, and pedestrians crossing wide streets while wearing stylish coats and impeccable makeup. My hotel stood near Myeongdong, a bustling shopping district filled with cosmetic shops and street food stalls. As soon as I checked in, I felt an urge to explore. I left my luggage in my room, grabbed my phone to help me navigate, and ventured out into the neon-lit night. The air smelled of fresh waffles, sweet custard, and hints of roasted chestnuts. Shoppers roamed about, drawn by the promise of discounts and the lure of the latest K-beauty products. I had no idea how much this city was about to change me. Every corner I turned, the place sang with possibility, as though each building had a story to tell. Part of me felt a pang of loneliness. My friends and family were asleep on the other side of the world, and I was here alone, uncertain if I'd find someone to share my wonder. But a simmering feeling of anticipation flickered in the back of my mind, a quiet voice saying, "Wait and see." Chapter 2. First glimpses of the unexpected. The next morning, my phone alarm rang at a merciless hour, reminding me I had to set up our company's booth at the skincare convention. It was hosted in a grand convention centre near Gangnam, a district known for high-end shops, upscale restaurants, and the shimmering facade of the city's elites. I arrived early, stepping into a massive hall that smelled of fresh linen, newly laid carpets, and the faint tang of disinfectant. All around me, exhibitors prepared their spaces. Glossy banners displayed the latest miracle, creams, serums, and beauty devices. The talk around me buzzed in a mix of Korean and English, with brand representatives discussing product features or adjusting displays. I found our assigned spot and got to work, unpacking promotional materials, aligning brochures, and checking that everything was in order for the potential clients who would pass by. Halfway through the morning, I heard a faint commotion from a nearby booth. Curious, I peered over one of our displays and saw a small crowd gathering, air, along with the rapid click of camera shutters. Someone important must be visiting. A brand ambassador, maybe. Intrigued, but still tethered to my tasks, I tried to stay focused, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was happening just a few steps away. About an hour later, once the crowd had dispersed, I made my way over to see what all the fuss had been about. The booth belonged to a well-known Korean skincare brand that specialised in natural ingredients like ginseng and green tea extracts. On a sleek promotional poster, I glimpsed the face of a young man, strikingly handsome, with dark hair that brushed just above intense eyes. Something about his face caught my attention. There was a soft earnestness in his gaze, as though he was both confident and vulnerable. "Excuse me," I asked a staff member at the booth. "Who is that model?" I pointed to the poster. The staff member blinked at me before replying. "Oh, that's Jinwoo. He's from the K-pop group Phoenix Rain. They're quite famous here." "Phoenix Rain," I repeated, the name foreign on my tongue. I mentally stored the detail away, telling myself I might search for them online later out of pure curiosity. At the time, K-pop was a world I only vaguely understood. Colourful music videos, impeccably dressed idols, elaborate choreography. The mention of famous made me glance at the poster again. He was definitely good looking, but probably unreachable. Someone from a glossy poster, not a real person. Little did I know that sometimes the unattainable steps off the poster and into real life in the most unexpected ways. Chapter 3. An accidental meeting. That evening, after an exhausting day of marketing talk and endless product demos, I decided to unwind. A co-worker recommended an old-fashioned Korean barbecue joint not too far from my hotel. Hungry for a hearty meal, I meandered through the narrow back alleys, trying to follow the directions scribbled on a sticky note. As I turned a corner, I saw a narrow door beneath a wooden sign. The mouth-watering smell of sizzling meat and savoury garlic greeted me. Inside, small tables with built-in grills filled the cosy space. A couple of older men chatted over soju in one corner, while a trio of younger women took selfies at another table. The place had a welcoming vibe, and I felt a pang of relief. Good food, minimal formality, just what I needed. I sat at an empty table and, using the basic Korean phrases I'd memorised, ordered samgyeopsal, pork belly, and a side of lettuce wraps. The waitress giggled at my accent, but nodded and brought a basket of panchin. Little side dishes of kimchi, pickled radishes, and marinated bean sprouts. As the grill started to sizzle, I let the aroma lull me into a calmer state of mind. At some point, the door opened and a man slipped in, scanning the room before taking a seat at the table behind me. I didn't pay him much attention until he spoke to the waitress, his voice a warm tenor that curled around the edges of the background noise. Something about it made me turn, just in time to meet his eyes, and my heart did a strange little flip. He was tall, with dark hair hidden beneath a baseball cap. His face was partially masked by a simple black mask, which many people wore outdoors in Seoul. I could only see the upper half of his face. It struck me that his eyes seemed familiar, but I couldn't place him. At first I thought I was intruding, so I smiled politely and returned to my meal. But every so often, I felt the prickling awareness of his gaze on me. It wasn't in a predatory or uncomfortable way, more like curiosity. Finally, as I was flipping my last piece of pork belly, I heard him clear his throat softly. "Excuse me," he said in English. "Would you mind passing me the gochujang sauce?" That's the spicy red pepper paste, often used with Korean barbecue. "Oh, sure," I replied, handing the small bowl over. noticed the unexpected kindness there. "Your English is good," I added, somewhat awkwardly, just to fill the silence. He pulled down his mask slightly, revealing a soft smile. "Thank you. I've been practicing." Up close I could see more of his features. Strong brows, a refined nose, lips curved into a genuine grin. There was something about him that radiated warmth. Then he lifted his baseball cap a notch, adjusting it so it covered more of his forehead, as if he was hiding. We exchanged a few more polite words. He asked if I was a tourist. I explained I was visiting for the skincare convention. He nodded. "Ah, you're one of the brand representatives then?" he inquired. "Yes," I said. "I work with a US cosmetics company." He paused, as if thinking of what to say next. "I'm in that industry too, sort of," he replied, and for a moment an unreadable expression flickered across his face. I took a sip of water, curious, but not wanting to pry. "Well, the beauty industry is huge here," I said lightly. "Seoul is amazing for skincare and cosmetics." Something like relief passed over his features, maybe because I didn't press him. "Yes," he said, "Seoul is complicated, but it can be beautiful." We wrapped up our meals separately, but a mutual understanding lingered in the air. I wondered if I'd ever see him again, or if this moment was just a fleeting brush with a stranger in a city of 10 million souls. As I left, I cast one final glance back and caught him looking at me with an intensity that sent a small thrill through my stomach. He lifted his hand in a subtle wave. I returned the gesture and stepped out into the cool night. Chapter 4. A Chance Collision. The next day at the convention felt like a marathon of handshakes and elevator pitches. My cheeks hurt from smiling at prospective buyers. By midday, I needed a break from the crowds, so I slipped into a small corridor lined with vending machines. I popped a few coins in for a can of iced coffee, savouring the sweet, milky brew as it cooled me from the inside out. I wasn't expecting the stranger from the barbecue joint around the corner, nearly colliding with me. We both jumped back, startled. He wore a sleek black suit with a crisp white shirt, and no mask this time. I recognised him instantly by the eyes, warm, curious, with a depth that made me want to know more. "Oh!" he exclaimed, his face lighting up in recognition. "It's you." My heart skipped a beat. "Small world," I managed, feeling my pulse quicken. "I didn't know you'd be here." He glanced around, almost nervous. "I'm part of a special event later," he explained, then motioned to the can in my hand. "That brand is my favourite iced coffee." I suppressed a grin. "Looks like we have something in common," I teased. His posture relaxed slightly, and he took a step closer, as if compelled by an unseen force. The hum of the air conditioner overhead filled the silence. At that moment, I felt an inkling of realization. His face was... it was the same face from that skincare brand's promotional poster, the one I'd noticed yesterday. Could it be? No, that was Jinwoo from the group Phoenix Rain. But then, looking closer, a wave of shock washed through me. He had the same shape of eyes, the same angular cheekbones, and that same soft-lipped smile. I tried to hide my surprise. "I never got your name," I said, hoping my voice sounded normal. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then answered, "Jin, it's nice to run into you again." "Jin," I repeated softly. "I'm Lily." His expression flickered between caution and relief. It was as though he was grateful I didn't pester him with 100 questions, even though my mind buzzed with them. "Is that short for Jinwoo?" The question popped out before I could restrain myself. His eyes widened slightly, confirming my suspicion. I watched him carefully, noticing how a ripple of apprehension flicked across his face. He nodded slowly, exhaling as though he had been holding his breath. "Yes, but please, just call me Jin," he murmured. He seemed to weigh his next words. I'd appreciate if you didn't mention you've seen me here. It's a complicated situation." He was trusting me with a secret, or at least a partial one. My heart softened. "Your secret's safe," I said. "I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but I won't say anything." He gave me a slightly crooked smile, exuding relief. "Thank you," he said earnestly. Then, with a small bow of his head, he took his leave, disappearing into the main corridor. I watched him go, half of me burning with curiosity, the other half floating on a strange cloud of excitement. Chapter 5. Close Encounters, Slipping Truths. A few days passed in a flurry of brand demonstrations and networking events, yet every time I stepped onto the convention floor, my eyes subconsciously sought Jin. Sometimes I'd see him at a distance, wearing a stylish jacket and talking quietly with a cluster of staff members. He seemed to belong to a different world, one reserved for celebrities and influential brand ambassadors. But every now and then, our gazes would connect, and in that fleeting second, it felt like we were the only two people in the room. One evening, after a particularly hectic day, my colleagues and I decided to check out the city's nightlife. We went to a trendy lounge perched atop a building in Itaewon, offering a spectacular view of the Seoul skyline. The music was subdued, an ambient hum, and the lighting cast everything in an intimate glow. My colleagues soon got wrapped up in conversation with potential clients, leaving me perched at the bar, swirling a mocktail. I was lost in my thoughts, remembering Jin's gentle smile when I felt a presence behind me. My heart gave a wild jolt as I turned. There he was, dressed casually in jeans and a loose sweater, a baseball cap pulled low. He looked around cautiously, his gaze resting on me. Clearly he'd followed me here, or perhaps we'd ended up in the same place by coincidence. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hi," I replied, warmth fluttering through my chest. He settled onto the stool next to mine. We faced each other, the city lights sparkling behind him. "I'm sorry if this is weird," he began, "but I saw you come in. I wanted to say hello." I let out a soft laugh. "I'm glad you did. But aren't you worried someone might recognize you?" He looked away, biting his lip. "Yes and no. Look, Lily, there's so much I want to say, but I also have to protect my privacy. He halted, struggling to find words. "I have obligations to my group, to my agency. They keep track of everything we do, especially if it might get in the tabloids." "K-pop group," I murmured, searching his face. "Phoenix Rain, right?" He froze, emotions flickering across his expression. Fear, longing, frustration. "Yes," he whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. It's just, I don't want to be constantly defined by my group's fame. I love music, but sometimes I just want to be Jin, a normal guy who can meet people without them seeing me as an idol." My heart ached for him. I reached for his hand, hesitating a moment before my fingers brushed his. "I get it. Being in the public eye must be exhausting." He stared at our hands, then back at me. "You'd be surprised how lonely it can be," he said, voice trembling slightly. "But I want to talk to you. I want to get to know you more." My throat felt tight, a combination of excitement and empathy. I thought about how easily I could flee from this complicated situation, but his vulnerability, his quiet longing for normalcy pulled me in. The truth was, I wanted to know him too. "I'm okay with that," Chapter 6. Unfolding Layers. Over the next week, Jin and I navigated an unspoken dance of secrecy. We agreed to meet in less conspicuous places, a quiet corner of a traditional tea house in Bukchon Hanok village, or a secluded park near the Hangang River, where we strolled at dusk as city lights glittered on the water. At first, conversation felt tentative, as though we tiptoed around landmines. His idle life, my corporate obligations, the question of whether this was all just a temporary infatuation forged by the thrill of being away from home. But gradually, we opened up. Jin told me about his childhood in Busan, where he sang along to old ballads on the radio while his mother cooked dinner. He joined a trainee program in Seoul at 16, living in a cramped dorm with 5 other boys who would eventually become the members of Phoenix Rain. He described the grueling practice schedules, the heartbreak of near-debut failures, and the miracle moment when they finally landed a contract. He spoke about the first time he heard thousands of fans chant his name in unison, how it made him feel both unstoppable and utterly terrified. I shared pieces of my own world. Growing up in Chicago, losing my father at a young age to a heart condition, my mother's unwavering support, and how I stumbled into a career in cosmetics. I admitted how the relentless demands of adult life had eroded my sense of adventure, how I wanted to reclaim that spark. With Jin, I felt like I could be wholly myself, free of pretense. We might have come from different universes, but at our cores, we were just 2 people searching for meaning. One night, we found ourselves sitting on a bench at the edge of the Han River, the gentle breeze caressing our faces. A few couples strolled by, but otherwise, the world felt asleep. Jin had brought a small portable speaker, and soft music wafted through the air, mingling with the lull of the water. He turned to me, eyes shining. "Would you like to dance?" I blinked. "Here?" His lips quirked into a shy grin. "Yes, if you'd like. We're mostly hidden under the darkness. Nobody's paying attention." I glanced around. A few street lamps lit the path, but the banks near us were dim. Timidly, I took his hand. He stood, pulling me to my feet, and we swayed gently. I wasn't a graceful dancer, but he guided me with a quiet confidence. The music was a slow R&B track, one I'd never heard but immediately loved. His chest felt solid against my cheek, and in that moment, I forgot about the world outside the faint glow of the lamplights. As the song ended, he pressed his forehead against mine. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" I breathed. "For letting me be a normal guy, if only for a little while." My heart clenched at the tenderness in his voice. "You never have to thank me for that," I said softly, brushing the back of my fingers along his cheek. "I'm just thankful you trust me enough to be yourself." Chapter 7. Barriers and Cracks. I knew our blossoming relationship was fragile. Jin's agency monitored his schedule obsessively. Public sightings with an unknown woman could spark rumours that might damage the group's carefully curated image. He insisted that we mostly meet at odd hours, or in secluded spots, rarely going out for dinner like normal couples would. Part of me ached for the everyday intimacies we couldn't have, holding hands on a busy street, spontaneously stopping by a cafe, or taking a simple photo together without risking exposure. One afternoon, we found ourselves walking along the quieter end of Insadong, an area known for traditional tea shops and antique art. Jin wore a baseball cap and kept his face partially turned away from passers-by. We popped into a small gallery featuring ink paintings of cranes and mountains. As we admired the intricate brushstrokes, Jin's phone buzzed in his pocket. He excused himself and stepped outside. A few minutes passed, and I wandered among the paintings, letting my mind drift. Eventually, asked softly. Is something wrong? He exhaled slowly. My manager found out I've been meeting someone. They're not pleased. His voice was tight, strained with worry. They're concerned about the group's image, the brand deals, everything. I felt a rush of anger on his behalf, but also the sting of reality. What does that mean for us? He shook his head, torment etched on his features. I don't know yet. They said we'll discuss it in detail, which means they'll either try to control it or shut it down. Tears pricked at the backs of my eyes. I didn't want to let my emotions overtake me. I reached for his hand. I'm so sorry, I whispered, my voice wavering. I never wanted to complicate your life. It's not your fault, he insisted, turning his hand over to intertwine our fingers. I dragged you into this. I didn't want to give up something that finally made me feel human. The vulnerability in his voice nearly shattered me. I squeezed his fingers, wishing I could shield him from his own success, from the monstrous weight that came with it. We left the gallery in silence, walking side by side through the old, winding streets. Even the bright colours of Insadong's shop signs seemed muted, overshadowed by the dread that settled between us. As dusk fell, I realised how precarious our bond was, like a delicate thread threatened by a storm. Chapter 8. The Unravelling Storm. The next few days were torture. Jin's texts became scarce, his calls barely a few minutes. He apologised repeatedly, saying his agency was forcing him to move back into the group dorm for team synergy. They were also restricting personal outings, focusing the members on an upcoming comeback album. I could feel him slipping away, not by choice, but by circumstance. Despite the heartbreak gnawing at my insides, I tried to focus on the remainder of my work commitments at the convention. We had another major brand presentation, and I needed to keep my composure. But every time I stood at our booth, greeting potential buyers, my eyes scanned the bustling crowds, hoping for a glimpse of Jin's familiar silhouette. He never appeared. On my final day in Seoul, I was packing up the product samples at our exhibit when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I spun around, heart pounding, only to see a young woman with short hair and a stoic expression. She introduced herself as Hannah, a manager from Jin's agency. Could we speak privately? She asked, voice firm but not unkind. Confusion knotted in my stomach. I followed her to a quieter corner of the hall, near an empty break area. The tension in her posture made my nerves flare. I'll be brief, she said. We know you and Jin have been seeing each other. The agency is deeply concerned about negative publicity and how it could derail the upcoming comeback. We're prepared to do whatever it takes to protect him and the group. I swallowed, my mouth dry. I understand your concern, but we haven't. She raised a hand, halting my protests. I'm here to ask, respectfully, that you sever contact, at least until the comeback is finished, possibly for longer. Think of Jinwoo's future, the other members who depend on him. Her eyes softened a fraction. He's a good person. We all want what's best for him. Please don't let a fleeting romance jeopardize his career. My heart splintered at her words. The insinuation that our connection was fleeting stung, but I could see the logic from a business standpoint. A meltdown of negative press could ruin him, the group, or their investors. If I forced him to choose, his responsibilities might devour him alive. So, what happens if I refuse? I asked softly, tears threatening. She pressed her lips together. I'm hoping you won't. You seem decent, from everything Jinwoo has told me. In fact, he cares for you deeply. That's why we trust you'll do the right thing. The right thing, I repeated in my head. The right thing. surge of anger. Did my own emotions matter at all? But overshadowing that was the knowledge that Jin had dedicated his entire life to this path. I couldn't stand in the way of his dreams, especially if it meant risking everything he'd built. I nodded numbly. Hana offered a business card with her phone number. If you have questions, you can contact me, but I think we both know how this has to end. She bowed slightly and walked away. I stood there, shoulders trembling, feeling like the world had collapsed around me. I had to let him go, to protect him. I made my way to a restroom, locked myself in a stall, and sobbed silently, heartbreak crushing my chest. Chapter 9. An agonizing farewell. That evening, I was supposed to meet with a few colleagues for a celebratory dinner before my flight home the next day. Instead, I found myself wandering the streets of Seoul aimlessly, the lights of the city blurring through my tears. My phone buzzed once. A message. Where are you? Jin. I wanted so desperately to see him, to explain, but I couldn't. My feet carried me to Cheongyejeon Stream, a peaceful urban waterway running through downtown. I settled on the stone steps by the edge, the gentle rush of water doing little to soothe my anguish. He called, once, twice, thrice. I stared at the phone, tears slipping down my cheeks, ignoring every ring. I wanted to answer, to scream about how unfair this was, but I remained silent. Eventually he texted, I'm near. Please let me see you at least once more. My heart battered my ribs. I typed back, Cheongyejeon, near the 3rd footbridge. Hurry. Within 10 minutes I saw him sprinting along the path, searching anxiously. My breath caught at the sight of him. Hair dishevelled, face drawn with worry. When he spotted me, he rushed over, kneeling in front of me, palms on my shoulders. Lily, he gasped, voice laced with desperation. What's going on? Why aren't you picking up? I looked into his pleading eyes, and all the strength I'd mustered cracked. Your manager visited me, I whispered, voice trembling. They want me to end this, to leave so you can focus on your group. Jin paled, anger flooding his features. They had no right. I'll fix this. I'll tell them they can't do this. I shook my head, cupping his cheek. They can do this, Jin. You know they can. And I can't be the reason your career collapses. You've worked so hard, given up so much for your group. They need you. His tears brimmed. I don't care. I can't lose you. I swallowed a sob. If we fight them, you might lose everything you've built, and I can't live with that. If you resent me one day, it would kill me. The devastation in his gaze shattered me. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into a fierce embrace. The sound of rushing water and distant city noise melted away, leaving only our trembling breaths. For the longest time, we just held each other, tears mixing with whispered confessions of love and heartbreak. At last we separated, though our fingers remained entwined. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, I murmured. Maybe someday, if it's meant to be, we'll find each other again. He pressed his forehead to mine. I'll never forget you, Lily. Never. Then, as if summoning courage, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small silver ring. It was simple, with a delicate engraving of a tiny musical note on the inside. My mother gave this to me when I debuted, to remind me why I started singing. I want you to have it. Keep it safe, and when you look at it, think of me. My tears rolled freely. I will, I managed, voice cracking. He placed the ring in my palm, closing my fingers over it. With one final, heart-wrenching kiss, we parted ways, the memory of our embrace all that remained. Chapter 10. A Quiet Resolve. co-workers chattered about the success of the convention, but my thoughts were lost in the swirl of heartbreak. I clutched Jin's ring in my hand, a symbol of the impossible love we'd shared. Back home, the world returned to normal. Conference calls, budget meetings, product launches. I felt hollow, going through the motions, with a polite smile that never reached my eyes. At nights, I'd stare at the ring on my dresser, longing for the sound of Jin's laughter, the warmth of his embrace. Sometimes I'd find glimpses of him online. News articles about Phoenix Rain's upcoming comeback, paparazzi photos of the group at a promotional event. He was always wearing that practiced, idol perfect smile, as though the heartbreak we endured never happened. Yet I clung to hope. We parted for a reason, one I believed was to protect his future, but part of me dared to wonder if the day might come when he could stand on his own terms, separate from the constraints of contracts and managers who dictated his every breath. Would he find his way back to me? Or would the pressures of stardom keep us forever apart? Weeks turned to months, the ache in my chest dulled, morphing into a nostalgic longing that I learned to bear. I tried to fill my life with fresh experiences, volunteering, travelling to new places, forging new friendships. Through it all, Jin's ring remained in a small velvet box on my nightstand, a reminder that sometimes love, no matter how strong, can be forced to yield to reality. Epilogue: The possibility of tomorrow. Almost a year later, I was in my Chicago apartment, lazily flipping through channels on a quiet Saturday morning. I'd left the TV on for background noise, not paying attention until a familiar tune pricked at my ears, a melodic pop beat that I recognised instantly as one of Phoenix Rain's hits. The local entertainment programme was featuring an interview with the group who had just finished a global tour. My heart lurched when the camera panned to Jin. His face glowed under the studio lights, more confident, but still carrying that gentle sincerity I'd first seen in him. He answered questions in Korean with occasional English remarks, the show's subtitles scrolling at the bottom. At the end, the host asked each member to share a personal reflection from their year of touring. Jin looked at the camera, exhaling softly. "This year, I realised the importance of fighting for what matters," he said, voice steady. "Music is my life, but there's more to living than just a career. Sometimes we lose things, or people, because we're afraid of the consequences. But I've learned that fear shouldn't dictate our future. If we love someone deeply enough, we find a way to keep them in our lives." My chest tightened, tears welling. The host moved on to the next member, but Jin's words resonated like an echo in my soul. Was he speaking for me? For us? That afternoon, I felt a sudden surge of determination. I emailed one of my Korean colleagues who still worked with me on brand partnerships. I asked if our company would be attending the next Seoul skincare convention, or if I could find a reason to go. She replied enthusiastically, yes, they needed help with new negotiations. I volunteered without hesitation, my pulse hammering at the possibility. 2 weeks later, plane ticket in hand, I boarded yet another flight to Seoul. The ring Jin gave me rested on a chain around my neck, hidden under my blouse. I didn't know if I'd find him. I didn't even know if he was free to meet. But as the aircraft soared across the Pacific, I felt the weight of heartbreak lift, replaced by cautious hope. Sometimes love is about timing, sometimes it's about perseverance, and sometimes it's about defying the boundaries others draw for you. I could still picture Jin's smile under the dim glow of the Hangang River's lampposts, the warmth of his arms folding me into a dance. That memory guided me through every cloud outside the airplane window, whispering a promise. Maybe this time we'll get it right. I landed in the city that had haunted my dreams for months. Stepping off the plane, I inhaled that familiar Seoul air. Part city dust, part excitement, part romantic potential. This time, I was determined to walk those streets without fear. Whatever happened, I would try to find him, to see if the tenuous thread between us still existed. The future was uncertain, but the possibility of tomorrow blazed bright and undeniable. With the ring pressed against my heart, I took my first steps back into the city that had witnessed our story. If fate willed it, I believed I would see Jin again, and if so, I was ready to fight for the love we'd once believed was impossible.